Yep. Okay. So again, a lot of the things we'll talk today, we either mention it briefly or some of it we already know, but it's good to go again. We will talk about conditions a lot because again, that's the basics of programming is conditions. is to compare something with something and then execute something. So that's going to be what we'll talk a lot. And this we haven't seen it yet, but we'll see it now. I actually forgot to close the homework here and open the browser here. Yes. All right. So we will see the logical operators that we can use to combine conditions, basically. So we know already how to write a condition like this ones, right? But now let's say that we have two numbers, or a number and a string, right? So a number equals 100 and a string equals this is my string. Now we know how to check if that number is bigger, smaller, equals to 100, right? So let's just check if it's equals to 100 and log equals to 100, and this should give us equals to 100. Yes. But now if we want to compare more than one thing, because that might come handy if we need to make sure that the number is 100 and the string is this is my string. We could, of course, I'll do it in a different line so we have the whole history here. We could, of course, do this, right? So a string, if it equals to this is my string, and now they are true, right? But this takes a lot of space, right? So we could make it a little bit different. Is it visible? Yeah, maybe. And that's, for instance, where this yeah, that's basically what this means, this and yeah. So ampersand, which the meaning of it is and, means exactly that. So we can put it here, and I'll copy and paste it, do another one. It's actually better. So we can put it here and then move this guy up here, right? And now I have an error because of this one. Really true, just to be a bit different. So now we should have that one. Basically this ampersand, which means and, let's just call it and from now on. This and means that whatever comes before and whatever comes after has to be true, both of them. If one of them is not true, it won't go there. So if we remove a couple of characters here, it's no longer there. So let's actually console log an else. Nope. So it goes there because, but this one is still true. But this one absolutely requires that both of them are true. And of course, as everything in programming, we can always go as deep as we want. So we can actually continue this. This is just to show, like, we can have more and, and if one of them, only one of them is false, everything is false. So string, right? Yeah, so this now it's really true. And this is the concept of AND. Of course, that if you want to give priorities, again, now let's have smaller numbers so that the text doesn't grow much. And yes, this goes against of what I said, but I'm going to use X and Y. 2 and z equals 3. So if x equals and y, here we go, 2 and z 3. Okay, so not confirm console. Okay. Yes. So this gives us yes. Now, like in mathematics, we can use parentheses to give priority to things. So let's say we can do, oops, this. So in here, what this operation means is that this one has to be true. Now it's no longer individual because we are wrapping it in parentheses. So now it's this one and this one that has to be true. But of course that in order for this one to be true, both sides have to be true. And in this case, it does not make sense to have the parentheses because all of it is AND.
Or.
Exactly. Now we can have OR. And OR, if one of them is true, then it's true. Then it doesn't care about whatever. So now if we change this one to OR, and I need to figure out how to type it on my keyboard. Yeah. Which is the pipe. I don't really know where it is on your keyboard, but it's not the capital E or L, it is a pipe. It's a very tall key. If you have a look on your keyboard, it should be, yeah, it's that one, it's shift, that one. It's a tricky one, like on my keyboard it doesn't even show where it is.
We'll find it out.
So you have to find it out.
It depends also which language you use in the keyboard.
Yeah, it depends on the language, it depends on Mac doesn't have it at all.
But how are you doing it in the Mac?
It's option E, option I, yeah.
Oh, okay.
But it's called
Pipe?
yeah, that's the name of it. It's pipe, which you can also name it vertical bar, but if you search for pipe, that's what it is.
In some cases, you just push shift and type all the buttons.
Yeah, but yeah, that one is very tricky to find on keyboards because it's not a very common thing, but for programming, it is very common, right? Not every single programming language uses it, but a lot of them do. So now in this case, we have an OR in here. So if we actually change this to 4, do you think it still works? Yeah. And basically the reason is that now the first segment has to be true because we have an AND, and the whole second segment has to be true. But inside of that, we actually only care if one of them is. So basically this one returns true because the first one is, and then that true is compared to the other side of it. So yeah, that's again, using a lot of ifs in a row or encapsulated can be complicated if you're not really sure, like if you have a lot of variables and then you change one and what happened, can be a little bit complicated, but yeah, that's how things get on this type of situations. Yes, and now in here we have, okay, again, this is a bit tricky to use true, the word true or false, because, or the boolean true or false, because of course if one of them, like this is basically what we mentioned, this is AND, both of them have to be exactly the same, and let's actually have a look. So for instance, wait, in this case it won't work because of browser. False const, I don't know. This now is true. It's true. So now, yeah, we should have an else just to see where it actually goes. Not that. Else. Log. It's not true. So yeah, because one is true, the other one is false. Now, it's still false because they are both false, of course. True is true. And yeah, I mean, you can, I guess, already, if both of them are true and we say or, it's true. I mean, by this matrix, which it's only zeros and ones, but I think we can understand a little bit of what's the result of each one of them. Because, yeah, again, on the previous homework, there was not really any exercise where we could use this, these two. I mean, we could try to put them there, but again, it depends on the use case. Sometimes you're going to have something big to compare with something big, and this would be a very, very good use case of it. Yeah, the type-offs, we talked about that last class, to figure out what's the type of a oh yeah, and this one is again the tricky thing of JavaScript. If bar in this case is a number and the type of bar is a number, but if you ask for the type of the type of, it's a string, because everything has to have a type of. So even type of has to have its own type of, which is a string. Because when you let's just write here console.log type of 100, right? So this gives us number, and the number, not the number itself 100, but the word number, it's a string. So the type of has to have a type of. That's, I mean, again, it's not that you're going to use this. This is also just to understand the concept of a programming language has its own rules of its own programming. It is a complicated thing, and this is, again, just for fun. It's not something anyone will ever ask you. What's the type of a type of?
We use it end-to-end, so can we use only one end?
No. No, it.
Programming language, it works.
Yes. In some of them can work. This should not. Where is it? Or it should. It does, but you should not use only one.
Yeah, we should not. Yeah.
Let me just. Actually, I have no idea what it returns. If we, let's say true and true, it returns 1. But oh yeah. Yeah. Wait. No, not you. You. Yes. The difference is that it's not really a Boolean. So, for instance, if we do now this, oh yeah, this one is still, come on. Go. What am I doing? If I wanted to do this, false. No, false, yeah. But if we do this. The thing is that this is intended as a representation of a Boolean. 0 and 1 can mean true and false, but at the end of the day, they are numbers. So it might be a bit tricky to use that. Because if you are actually comparing it to a number string or to a real number and you have equal, 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 then it won't give you true because it's not a Boolean, it's not true. And that's basically the reason why this should always be, because again, the Boolean should be what we should use. A lot of times, for instance, when, and that's not for now, but when there is some API that you need to get data from, they will give you a 1 or a 0 for true or false. That's very bad practice to use ones and zeros. Even though, yeah, we all make jokes that programming is about ones and zeros, but for Booleans, we should use true and false. Yeah. So yeah, functions. We had a very brief explanation of functions last class. I mentioned it, but I skipped it because that was not something we should talk yet. But some of you used them, and that was completely fine. And yes, we saw. Well, actually, we talked about the random function of what is it, what it can do, right? And yeah, in here, for instance. Yeah, sorry. I was completely out. I thought it was random again. No, this is another function in the math named class, let's say. So can we clean this thing? Yeah. So again, the math, and if you actually just print that on a console, there is a bunch of things, and this is all the functions that you can use on the math. And as you can see, like there is like the constants, the pi constant, right? The 3.141 whatever. There is a lot of them here. All the mathematics expressions, the logarithm thing, the tangent, the sin and yeah, sin is here as well. All the mathematic functions should be here. Maybe not all, but the most important ones, the ones that people use the most. And these, of course, are functions. So, for instance, we can actually, and that's one of the probably first things that people do in programming. It's to actually figure out the maximum of two numbers. Because now you guys already know conditions, right? You could easily have a function that calculates the maximum, or have a piece of code that giving two numbers says this one is bigger than that, so this one is the maximum. But again, there is a function for that, as there is for a lot of things. And I believe that this, of course, should not matter the order, right? It always gives you the maximum of two numbers.
If we want to put an array inside to have the maximum array,
yes.
we just put the name of the array.
Let's actually see that. Can we open here? No, we cannot see. No, this that's math.
I think it's something related
Dot
to
max.
function, not math.
Yeah, in order, yeah, you can do this, but oops, sorry, but we have not learned what this means yet. You can send a bunch of numbers. I think you can send way more than these ones. I hope I'm right. Yeah. You can send as many numbers as you want into the max function. The tricky part of it is that you cannot just send the array. I think this should give us an error, exactly. Because an array is the array including the brackets of the whole thing. and the max only accepts the values of it, only accepts the real number of it. It does not accept, if you send a string, it tells you, nope, I don't know what the string is. If you send an array, it tells you not. And these 3 dots, basically, it distributes whatever is inside of the array into it. So for instance, instead of sending an array of 1, 2, 3, whatever, it sends the value of it. Let's just have a look at it. So if I do this, I hope this works. No, it doesn't. We cannot print it. Yeah, because JavaScript does not recognize it here. But basically, this takes out only what's highlighted without the brackets. But again, that's something that's a little bit more advanced, and we will one day talk about it. But yeah, again, if you search for max, and this is the documentation part of it, the Mozilla website, and they actually have that example here because it is an option. But I would advise you to use only numbers for now, and yeah, and then later when we understand exactly what this does, we could use that. Yeah, and again, these are functions that are given to us by JavaScript, by the library itself. And as I showed you as well, the random, the ceiling, the floor, all those things are functions. Because, and again, functions is something that ends on a bracket, right? In order to call it, we need to have brackets. I didn't put water. Now, we can create our own functions. And yeah, the function has to, how to approach this, like this example. In here, this is not a function, right? This is just a variable that has this value here. But this is a function. And it's even, we use the word functions to define it. We don't use let, we don't use var, we don't use const, anything else. We will use the word function to define a function. And it always has the parentheses at the end, and this is the name of the function that we will call. And again, this exact piece of code here is the syntax of creating a function, basically. And then, of course, we call it by doing this. Now, I would say that this function that we are looking at is a bad one. And the reason why I would say is because the function is not returning anything. The function is, like, there is this variable outside of the function, because the function starts here, ends here, right? And then the function is changing the variable, actually. It's saying that the variable is equal to the variable itself plus this string. And to be honest, I would consider this a very bad practice to get used to it. Try not to get used to that, because the function is again to make a piece of code reusable for more things. So if it's something that requires, because if I copy this function somewhere else, it won't work, because it does not know what these two things are. They are not defined anywhere. They are defined outside of the function. So for instance, the sum here, as it is defined here, this is a very simple and good function. Everything the function needs is there. Of course, the function needs two numbers in order to sum two numbers, and that's what these variables here are called. Again, in here, and I've been telling you to use let, var, const, and now in here you don't see it because you don't have to. Like, it's not a requirement, not in JavaScript. Other programming languages, you have to specify here what type it is or whatever. In here, we don't need that. And these two can only be used inside of the function. So for instance, let's actually do something different. Let's do a multiplication, right? Why not? So if we call function multiplication. And in order to multiply, we'll have two numbers, right? Number 1 and number 2. And now we can even do things a bit different from that one. We can actually say result equals number 1 times number 2, and then we return result. Now this again, this is a little bit overkill, because we could have this on a result. We could have it here, right? Because the return is going to return whatever you give to it, basically. But I'm just putting it here just because I like to have things separately. Again, if I would do this for work, I would put return number 1 times number 2, because we are not doing anything else except the multiplication.
We add one number.
But we might at some point want to add more stuff, want to make a condition, make whatever. So it's always good to have a return all the way down, completely alone, returns one thing only. So, and for instance, this one, in order to call it, now let's actually see what happens if we do like this. We are not really sending anything, right? Where am I returning there? Maybe not. Oh yeah, I should console log it. Let's console log multiplication. It actually says none, which is none available or something like that, non-defined. Something. Oh no, I should not save this. And the reason is because we are not really sending any parameters, because it says I need number 1 and I need number 2. So in this multiplication, we need to send some numbers. So we can send 2, and then, and again, our VS Code or other IDEs will show you actually what it needs. So like, because I'm actually hovering it, it shows multiplication is a function, right? And requires number 1 and number 2, and it returns a number, because the IDE can identify exactly like what's happening inside of the function, and it returns that. And of course the input is separated by a comma. So if I do this, now it's returned 4. And again, I'm console logging the result of this. The result of this is whatever it returns. So now we could change things a little bit inside here. Result is so yeah, whatever, again, whatever we return here, it's going to be the value of it. Sorry. And yeah, and that's a very simple function. We can add as many, when we are looking at here, inside of those brackets, we call these parameters, right? It's the parameters of the function. When we are using it, usually we call arguments of the function, but either you call them arguments, parameters, people will understand what that means. But usually when it's inside of the function, it's parameters. When you are calling the function and you send in the arguments of the function. But yeah, it's...
Marco?
Yes?
If we say we make the console inside the function and we remove the return, and we say the console log result, and out, we just call the function. It's also what?
Yeah. Yeah, let's just do another function for that. So this one's gonna be division. Is it like that? No. Div. Let's go for the simple way. So number 1 again, number 2 again, and now let's just console log those, right? Number 1 divided by number 2. And now out here we call div with, I don't know, 8 and 2. It console log the 4, right? And if we want to make it as a string, the result is that. Now, the problem of having a console log inside of a function is that this function is not really reusable. For instance, now let's say let's have a const division dv, right? div of two numbers, 6 and 2. Now this is no longer valid because I cannot really use this as nothing, right? But if I have like this, I know that this is a number, so I can use it now to do something. It is okay, of course, to have a console log there, but again, a function should always return something, always. Sometimes there might be functions that for some reason they don't have to return, right? Let's say if you create a function to actually print a string, and let's just do that. So we have name, first name, and then last name, and now we have a function that is called full name, right? Or we actually won't call it full name, we'll call it print full name, so that we know that it's going to print. It's not going to calculate, it's not going to return, it's going to print a full name. And of course it needs the names. Console log, and now let's just do first plus this last. Now here I just need to call print full name of first name and last name. Now it printed the full name.
But do we need to write down? I think that we don't need to write first name and last name in the end. Because it's already defined.
No. In here it's a different name of variable. If I do this, it will not undefined and define. Because this is a different variable. It's not the same variable.
The variable first and last, it's a variable related to the function.
Yeah.
You can use this variables inside the function. When we call the function, we send him or send to him a variable or values.
Yeah.
But when we call the function, the first variable, the value of this variable will be copied or send it to the first.
Yeah, I changed it now, actually. No, but it will be the first name value.
To the first value. And the second, or the value of the second variable will send to the second variable in the function. And make the calculation of this value and return the result will return to, but because it's
that one does not return.
Printing, we will talk about this one. The value that returns from the function will be put in this variable. This makes sense?
Yeah.
But for instance, now, even though I renamed it to exactly the same first name and last name as we have defined it here, right? Is it the same? First, yeah, now it is the same. Now, if we do this, it's still undefined, even though there is exactly, it's defined here. It's because whatever we define here, it's in its own universe, in its own scope. So you can have the same variable, constants, array names, and then if you have a function, you can have exactly the same names and they will never interfere with each other. And again, that's why I criticized that first function I saw, because now this here, it's this one. It's no longer that one. So when someone did this, right, this function here, check item, if now in here we would have a to-do item as an argument, that would break the whole code. The code will not work anymore. That's why it's bad to define things outside of the function. If you need a function, the function should be its own thing. The best way to understand a function would be if I copy only the function somewhere else into an empty file, will I get an error or not? And if I do, then it's wrong. A function should be unique, should be atomic, as people call, which is like independent of anything, anyone, basically. And it should be able, like, someone should be able to call it, right? So now, if we, not finally, first name and last name, right? And now it should print them out. But still, the function still is not returning anything. It's just this. So for instance, now let's console log the function, right? Or let's result. Let's give it a number, value. So whatever the function is returning, we want it here. Console log plus result, not result.
But the results out of the function.
The result is. Oh, I'm already using result somewhere else.
No, because it's out of the function.
No.
We didn't use the return.
Yes. We are not returning anything, right?
Okay.
So it tells us like there's nothing there. So we don't even know if it actually printed. We know because we can see it, but we don't know if it would be doing something else. We would not know anything about this. So there is one thing we can do, which is always return whatever. Let's return true, right? If there would be any error before that return, we would get the error. So in this case, we know that the function executed. We know that something happened, and it was okay because it got to the return, so no error happened before. So for instance, in here, if we say that the first name equals first name dot to what was to uppercase, right? Isn't it? Should be. It went uppercase, and we know that it went because we are printing it. But if something would be wrong, we would get to know that, because then it would never return true. It would never get here. So again, in a function, please always return something. Even if you feel like, yeah, but I did all the calculations and I don't have to return anything, then return true at the end, because that means that everything went okay. The code was good. And yes, these are cases that can happen a lot. Sometimes you'll have functions that don't really return a value because they change something, that modify something. But I would ask to return true, or actually, yeah, if you just return, it's undefined. That doesn't work in JavaScript. It works in other programming languages, but in JavaScript, return true or something.
Sometimes when you use console log inside a function, just to be sure they can call this function, or the code in this function will be executed. That's the first time. Or if you want to console log, we call it a temporary values inside the function, just to be sure that the value is as you expect. It's just use it for testing. But as Marco said, you should return something every time. Return a value or return something.
Yeah.
From the function.
So in JavaScript, always, in JavaScript, always the function returns values. If we say return, it gives us some values.
Yeah.
But is there any way, is there any means, like in Java, if we say static, it returns value. If we say void,
it returns void and doesn't return it.
So what about here? Is
there
anything that can block you from returning some values?
No. For instance, in what you're asking, and in other programming languages, you can, for instance, return void, which basically void means nothing. It's the void, and it's just like a break. For if you have a if else, and in one condition we want to say if it gets here, I want to stop this. I want to get out of this function. In that case, I would return only. This still gives us undefined, but this is the way of returning void, basically. Like in other in Java or I think in C as well, there is the void word. In here, there is no void word. But if you just type this, for instance, actually we can try that. Console log. It's here, and oops, no. So for instance, if now we return, again, the IDE already grayed out that one because it's unreachable. We cannot reach this one at all because we're already returning here. So if we run our code, it's here, and of course the result now is undefined because we are returning nothing. But again, this is the way of returning void in other programming languages. But because in JavaScript a lot of things can be undefined, I would prefer to return something. Maybe return false, return true. Unless, of course, whatever we are returning can change the usage of the function, we could always return something. Because it is a bit tricky, the undefined word, to figure out why is it undefined. So, but by doing this, this would be the void in other programming languages. So it's not here actually. And yes, and again, of course, a function doesn't have to have parameters. For instance, let's think of a function without parameters. So for instance, in here, if we console log the function without parameters, right, it returns whatever that one is returning. And yes, there might be some cases where we need, for some reason, a function without any parameters. Right now, I honestly cannot think of any, but I've done it. Everybody's done it, and yeah, sometimes that's needed. Again, if you have like in a homework of last week, we had no, that was the formula actually.
Uppercase or lowercase function didn't need
yeah, true. Yeah, but for instance, let's say if you have a formula where the formula does not have does not need arguments for some reason, you can always use it or if you just want to return, again, a big string and you want to reuse it a lot, then instead of using the string everywhere, you can create a function for it. Why not? Again, it might be overkill because you can easily put it on a variable, but it's an option that you have in your code to do. Let me just check the examples here of functions. Yeah, that's it, functions. And yeah, we can of course, we are, yeah, in here we use names for it. And I think maybe we'll go for lunch and then we'll make an exercise. We'll try to make a calculator after. Should we? Let's do that then.